Welcome back to the High Performance Herd. Today, we're lucky to have with us Danny Schnaars, the CEO of AmeriGlobe LLC, we'll call it a storage slash solution bag company. And Danny, I'll have you talk more about that. But you and I have had a short conversation prior to this podcast. I think super intriguing, family business, grew up in the business. And there's a bunch of things that I want to spend some time with you on today. But welcome to the podcast.
Thank you for the invitation. I look forward to our talk.
So, my audience knows that I almost always start with, hey, this is a High Performance Herd podcast. How do you lead and get more from your teams? How do you drive high performance? And so I always start with, well, there's a leadership question. How did I start to understand that I could lead, that I wanted to lead, that I wanted to build something bigger than me? What's your origin story of leadership, Danny?
Well, working for my dad, it wasn't like I had to start from scratch. I somewhat inherited an opportunity. But in all of his lessons, it was never about what authority do you have to solve a problem. It's how do you convince people that your solution is the right version of the answer. And that seemed to have worked throughout my career here, whether it was fixing problems or coming up with new solutions. It wasn't about making somebody do something. It was about bringing them on board with the solution.
Well, you and I talked about that you kind of grew up on the plant floor. You did everything. You did the stuff that, your dad was like, hey, this needs to be done. You need to learn it from kind of the ground up is kind of how I remember, even so much that eventually you hurt yourself doing it. But before we get to any of those stories, I'm always like, hey, in reflection, what did working on the plant or shop floor teach you about or shape your leadership?
There were a couple of things, but I think the most important is to respect the work. The people that make the bags, it's grueling work. It takes effort every day, and it's kind of the same thing every day. And I don't think most people want that job. So you have to respect the people that are doing that job. And that's a lesson that I told my kids when they started working in the plant, and it seemed to serve them well. If you act like the work isn't important, the people around you, that you're going to lose them.
And when you think about kind of that floor up, meaning I started there, you moved kind of back office. We had that conversation. When did you first realize, like, not just founder son, but man, I've earned the right. I'm very capable. When did that occur? When in your mind do you go, yeah, I'm up for this. I'm more than capable? Because I always frame this because everyone thinks, oh, well, like everyone's ready and they know. Almost every CEO I've ever had a conversation with was like, no, I was terrified. Like, and that you're not ready and you haven't done it until you've done it. So, was there a moment for you that said, yeah, I've earned the right, I'm capable, despite being founder son?
We had hired a guy to run most of our operations, and that turned out to be a mistake. And there ended up being a lot of cleanup that had to happen afterward. And when the problem started to disappear in relatively short order, it gave me a sense of confidence that, yes, I really can do this. And again, it was just letting people understand what was needed and why it was needed, and respecting them enough to let them do those tasks.
So I have some similar background, Danny. I grew up in my grandparents' retail stores. They owned 6 retail stores in middle of nowhere, Indiana. And I always had this perception, like they remember Dave, me, as an 11-year-old coming in and sweeping floors. And so there's a follow-up question for me, like, well, for the employees that have known you since you were a kid, what did they need to see from you before they went, yeah, he can lead us?
There, I think it's just the willingness to back them up when things are bad, or when a decision doesn't work out, and being willing to take a tough stand on a decision that people don't want to have to make and don't necessarily agree with. We had a negotiation recently where we wanted to, and I say recently, for AmeriGlobe, 5 years is recently. Uh, and it was a big opportunity, but there was talk about us going in below cost, not below cost, but
Mm.
below our book value of the product to gain the sale. Why would we negotiate against ourselves? That's never a good idea. Of course, the purchasing team is going to tell you your price is too high. That kind of should be one of their default actions. And uh, that decision worked, and we got the business, and we didn't have to go below where we should be to get it. And I think those kind of actions and opportunities, that's where you start to change the view. Although it's hard on both sides, there's still people here that I worked with since I was basically a kid, where I'll say, Miss Marlene, can you do this for me? And she's one of our sales reps, and I've known her for almost 40 years. She's always going to be Miss Marlene because I knew her when I was 15, 16 years old.
Yeah, I mean, I have some of the same stories, Danny. It was funny because, like, I had people when I worked at my parents' retail stores, we would walk a mile to get like lunch, and we would walk together. And, and when we first walked, it was like, well, I need to take Dave, the little kid, to make sure he can get there.
Yes.
And you jump forward 15 years later, I'm coming back from college, I'm running one of the stores, and you're like, I'll take you to lunch. I'll drive you and pay for your lunch today. But I felt like they're chaperoning me to to go to lunch. So those things are hard to get by just from or past based on our history. Um, so we've talked a little already about AmeriGlobe, but if you said, here's what AmeriGlobe does, help the audience understand kind of what you guys do, how you do it. It's more complex than we make bags.
Right. So we do make bags, but they're 5-pound bags that hold 2,200 pounds of any dry, free flowing substance. People see them all around, but you don't notice them because they're not important to day to day life. At least you don't think they are until you find out that everything you use, the raw materials came out of those. We've been doing that forever. And it's a mature commodity market, which makes it difficult because our method of selling is solutions oriented. We have more than 40 patents, and in an industry where everybody sells based on give me your spec so I can quote it, we do it a little different. That makes it difficult in some respects. We also have a flood control division where we sell flood control systems that are meant to protect neighborhoods and infrastructure.
Mm.
And then our newest innovation is a way to make bulk bags without sewing them. Bulk bags have been sewn for the past 50 or 60 years when they were invented, not by AmeriGlobe. And since then, as a market, we've been trying to avoid having to put holes in the fabric to make the pieces go together. And we figured out how to do that. And now we're licensing companies around the world to do that. So while we're a packaging company, we're now also a technology company selling a way to make the packaging lighter and better for everybody.
So your dad ran the company for how long?
He retired last year. He ran the company for the first 30 years. My brother and I and our CFO have really run it for the past 10. And as we've been working on fusion, which is the method of making bags without sewing them, that's pretty much taken all of his focus. A good way to describe it is through some of the fake titles that we gave each other.
Huh.
One that for my dad was the president of last resort,
Uh,
meaning we were only going to him when things were so bad that only he could help. And the president of last resort became less and less called on as we grew older and matured as a team.
If you think about that transition, hey, dad, well, I'll call it the patriarch, starts to move aside. Your brother start to take some role, and eventually, I think you told me last time we're named GM, and that was roughly 10 years ago. For you, what changed? And I'll use the word emotionally. It doesn't have to be. It's like for you when that happened.
I don't think anything really changed emotionally. What he did was add a title to responsibilities that I was already taking care of.
Awesome.
They grew a little bit at a time. There was never like a light switch where all of a sudden everything was my responsibility. And even now with him retired, we have a CFO and a COO that take care of different aspects of the company. So it's always going to be that team effort between the three of us.
Awesome. And how did you guys arrive at those roles and responsibilities over time at the origin? What kind of drove the, particularly you and your brother? Like, how do you clarify that? It's inside the family. Really, we got to go to Thanksgiving together. I always joked about that and stuff like that. Like, how have you navigated that, and how did you clarify who does what?
That is really interesting because my brother actually stepped away from the company for a while.
Oh,
He and I both started off in the plant. My first job was to cut ties, so I was literally pulling a piece of webbing, cutting it, and grabbing the next piece. That was my first job for a year, and he did similar jobs. When he came back, he became a sales rep for us and did outside sales and solution selling. At the time, I was doing our IT work. I was doing programming, a little bit of marketing, but mostly just keeping the internal part of the company functioning. Then we hired a general manager who was from one of our customers. And that worked for a while, but we hit a rough patch, and dad decided that he was going to keep the leadership in house, so to
mm,
speak. So he gave us different responsibilities, and those morphed over time. For a while, I became responsible for all of our production while Matt was doing sales. And then Matt ran one of the plants. And then he did the overseas travel where he qualified our uh, partners in India or China or Turkey or Indonesia, you know, uh, in different parts of the world. When he came back, we were really we were really growing, and the idea of needing kind of one head over the operations as a whole. So there wouldn't be any competition between the US manufacturing needs and the import manufacturing needs. It made sense to combine that. So he's really been responsible for that for basically a decade. Uh, when dad left, it, the problem that we were trying to solve then is just how are we going to lead the company and decide where we're going as a company next. And uh, we decided that I would do that, and what Matt would do would be more the operations side, and that's really where he shines. There's not a problem in the world that he won't just run his
mm.
through to solve. And in an acute situation, that's the kind of drive that you need. I tend to be a little more analytical, so it breaks down more between tactical and strategic between the two of us.
Awesome. So there's some clear strength differentiation that you just let set. All right. Well, here's where I'm good. Here's where you're good. This is the logical move,
Right.
which is off. Is there part of, and I'll move away from kind of the family stuff here after this question, but is there part of your dad's legacy that's kind of non-negotiable? That this is the essence of AmeriGlobe. It's alive and well. We'll never really move away from that. That was started by dad.
Uh, there's a lot of my dad's flavor that's never going to go away. He's always taking care of the people that worked here, whether it's lending money or time or just understanding the problems that our team has outside of the the office or the plant. The person is more important than their function at the company, and that we need to remember that always. And
Uh,
since
that's
we're
right.
a somewhat successful company, we have a responsibility in the community too. So yearly, we have basically a tithe that we do back to the community, to local charities that each of the managers is responsible for choosing.
And are there parts of your father that you go, yeah, we got to be willing to leave those behind? That times have changed. We have a different view. Your brother and you, something there that you go, yeah, despite Dad's best wishes, we've decided we need to move beyond that.
Not as much as I thought.
Ah, that's interesting.
Uh, there is a line that says, it, "It's not bad if the deal doesn't work out, but it's bad if the deal takes a long time not to work out." So sometimes he would hold on to hopes that took longer than they should and didn't work out. That's something that we need to work on.
Yeah.
But it's also in our company DNA. On the other side, my dad seemed to always be able to see people's superpower and harness that in the right direction. And he had a real sense of optimism about
Mm.
everything, that it would work out. And I I was usually the foil to that because you can't always assume everything is going to work out. So that change has been a little difficult because that's now my responsibility, is to be that person showing optimism and others on the team to restrain it.
Well, it's funny, Danny, because you chuckled a little with that. And as soon as you chuckled, I always go, I have four boys, so I know what you're describing. And I always loved, and I'll butcher it a little, but the essence of the Mark Twain quote that said, at 16, I thought my dad was the dumbest man on the planet. And 5 years later, I was amazed at how much he had learned.
That is a
Um,
great line.
yeah, something like that. And so I always look at my young boys as they, I have one that's getting off to college where they got it all figured out. And they come back to you over the next, 5 or 6 years going, man, dad's pretty smart. Dad understands. And you're like, yeah, because I've made all the dumb mistakes that you're going to make. And, we have to walk some of the path on our own. So, um, you alluded to 40 patents. I was amazed when we first talked. Like, you go to your website, they're there, it's present. There's a bunch of innovation for something that seems really simple. And you and I talk that you're continuing to invest there beyond what many would consider like, oh, that makes sense. Um, there's I'll call it a conviction, a belief. You and I talk, I think leadership is inspiring people to believe in something and then take action toward it. For you guys, there's been a technology drive, patent drive, make this better. What's created that conviction?
Well, that was all my dad. Our first patent was actually for the top area of the bag. And I won't get into the technical part of it, but it revolves around the top doing this. And my grandfather said, "You got a patent for this? They give you a patent for that?" And really, the heart of a lot of the patents we have is the idea that we're acknowledging physics and Mother Nature and just working within those rules instead of trying to fight with it. So all around us, there are problems that are just inherent in the package. If you look at bulk bags on even some of our competitors' websites, they lean, they slump. Those are bad things that should be fixed, that cost money. But in our industry, they've been like that for so long that they don't get seen as a problem. There's another old phrase: the fish doesn't notice water. And
Yeah.
the same thing is true if you only see bags lean or slump or fall over even, then why would you look for a solution? He recognized that there should be a solution and created them. And we've taken that not just to bags, but to flood control to the creation of bags. He helped a local inventor get a patent on a wheelchair apparatus,
Mm.
not to make any money off of it, just because it was a good idea that should be out there. And we're constantly looking for the next improvement that we can earn. And it's not limited to our R&D team. Our sales reps have gotten patents because they came up with something novel. Obviously, we help to invest in the time, the testing, the effort, the legal fees, but we reward that effort.
So there's a cultural element, and this is all about building high performance teams. It's interesting. You and I didn't talk about the sales reps and other. So there's clearly, I'll call it an innovation. There can also be with patent of, we created and found something, so let's protect it. Um, but there's a, hey, let's try, fix, solve, I would assume, in all of that. Um, is that true? How would you talk about it? What's created that environment? How do you maintain it?
Well, obviously, my dad created it because the first patent was applied for within the first year he opened AmeriGlobe. So he set that in the DNA right from the beginning, and he was in a an infringement fight like 2 years later. So the
Mm.
idea that we would earn a patent and defend that patent or enforce that patent, that was something that we had from the beginning. Really, the idea of carrying it forward, we have an R&D team. They're helping drive Fusion forward, and they help in other areas. But we're just looking for this function takes too much effort. How can we change it? A recent project that we're working on is for the installation of power poles, the poles that have the power lines on them.
Yeah.
So in the South, they're constantly having to be changed because of hurricanes and tornadoes and all the great stuff that comes with Gulf Coast weather. When they change them, at least in this area, they're pulling the pole out, they're digging the hole, and then they're putting a bulk bag full of aggregate beside the pole, cutting or torching the side of the bag open, dropping the aggregate down, and then hand shoveling it into the hole. Well, that's an enormous amount of work. It's 4,000 pounds of rock. I don't know if you've done much shoveling, but it that's back-breaking work. And cutting the side of a bag open is just not a real good idea either. So we developed one that you can release from the side of the bag so that you're not reaching under it, and that can put the dirt or the aggregate in the hole so that you're not shoveling it at all or
Mm.
only minimally. And that idea came about because we had a solution that worked in one area that we modified to work in another.
So, you and I talked that there's a lot on the company moving toward fusion versus sewing. You and I talked a little bit about the challenging of having skilled sewers, but what you said is like, no, the bigger challenge is fusion solves other problems, holes through the bag, other kind of things. But there was a lot of investment to get there to make it work, to build toward, hey, we have a royalty stream now. We want fusion to be adopted everywhere. I assume in all of that, there's this tension between we're investing money today to build a stronger future that people can question, your team can question, even sometimes we as leaders can question. I talked earlier about conviction toward that. Talk about that a little. Like, what drove the AmeriGlobe team to go, yeah, we're going to continue to bet here. This is a smart choice. This is the winning strategy for us.
So we've been investing more than half of our profits every year into fusion because we think that it's something that could create a sea change in the industry. And yes, conviction is important, and it's a difficult decision because it's taking funds away from other areas of the company that we could use to grow more of our core business rather than this other part of the business. But when you look at what a product like Fusion does, not just for AmeriGlobe, but for the industry as a whole and the sustainability of it, it it has to be worth it. I mean, if Fusion works the way we think it will, AmeriGlobe, like we're set for the foreseeable future because we'll be making the Fusion equipment and working with the royalties that we get from the production. But every bag will be some percentage lighter than all of the sewn bags, which is better for the environment. The grueling work that I told you about earlier to make bags, some of that will be eliminated because instead of this craftsmanship like talent that people have to be able to sew will be replaced with much easier work where you're just weaving the parts together so that you're not replacing it, so that you're not doing all of that sewing work. It's so good in so many ways, not to mention the fact that the bag is just better. Uh, it's something that I think we would be making a mistake through every part of our company if we didn't do it.
Awesome. So, I'm always left with I need to inspire people to believe. In this case, you need to convince not only your team that this is a better bag, and just in our short conversation, I get it. Yet you also talked about that a fish doesn't notice water, and you've talked about well, we got to get the market to understand and accept that this is a better bag. And what are the challenges there, and how do you overcome them?
Well, the biggest challenge is that companies that buy bags, they're giving their existing specs to our competitors to quote, and that's what they're quoting. If there's not an understanding that there is an issue, there's not a reason to search for a solution to that issue. And one of the uncomfortable facts about modern business is that if you are an evangelist for a change that changes something that's not viewed as broken, you're risking your career in making that statement. So we have to create enough momentum in change that it creates a feeling of safety for the people who are are pushing that change within their companies. So we're really going at it from both directions. We're marketing to the people who buy the bags, showing that it's a better bag, and we're marketing to people who produce the bags, showing how much easier it is to make and how it positively affects their labor needs.
I mean, you got and before you made that statement, I was literally going, yeah, they need to feel safe enough to abandon a spec. They need to go, yeah, hey, there is a problem I don't really understand. And for many of these companies, it's been decades of this is what we've done, right? Like this is the bag we've used for 20 years.
Well, and the purchasing agent can't make the change on their own. They have to get the quality team and the sales team and the production team all to agree that this benefit will touch all of those departments.
And Danny, is there a concrete, I'll call cost of the status quo? Can you point to it? Is there case study? Is there real dollars saved? Is there, the avoidance of labor? Is there something that you guys could point to drive this adoption? Or is it harder than that?
It's going to be harder than that because the situations are so different from company to company. There are companies that buy bags by the millions where they're buying the exact same spec every time. Their filling and handling process is literally a machine. And then there's the rest of the world that's using 5,000 a month or 500 a month, where their handling is different and their shipping is different. Uh, there is an improvement to be made in everybody's system, but we have to do a good job of showing that there's a problem worth solving.
So, in a way that I can, as a novice, understand the challenge, I'm left with like, there's this whether bifurcated, but kind of two different companies, right? There's our old bag business where we're selling traditional bags, and there's this new business that is new technology, new innovation, new product, and also a business model shift, right? Like, hey, we're moving more towards selling equipment and royalty than selling bags.
Right.
Um, is that premise true?
Yes.
Yeah. So then it becomes, well, now I have a more complicated challenge going forward, right? I got to convince the team that, hey, what we've done is great, but this new thing we need to pour into, we got to figure out, we got to solve. Talk about that challenge internally.
That challenge isn't really overly large for us
Good.
because we're a small company and we're relatively agile. If I need something done in marketing, I have one person to go to. I know she's going to knock it out of the park. My sales team functions under the concept of their territory being like their own little company. They're all self driven. They bring problems to us to help solve, but we give them the tools to go out into the market and to attack it in the way that they want. So they don't require a lot of hand holding because they know what they're supposed to do. They know how to do it and they do a good job of it. So really the bigger hurdle is just changing the market view of bulk bags away from the legacy design. The iPhone had the same problem.
Yeah.
It just had the advantage of it looks really cool.
Yeah. But I remember watching the like movie documentary on that. Like, and I remember the BlackBerry team going, "Who will want that phone? There's no buttons." And it's but that's where the market was. Like BlackBerry was it at the time. And so there's always this new innovation adoption curve and convince, and the innovation early adopters, fast followers, and then the masses. And that it's predictable. You can look at that cycle. As you guys look there, what's the then, I'll call it marketing, position, value demonstration, and how are you guys working on that story? What's your team doing to sell the advantages?
So we figure that we have three different customer groups in our market. First, it's the people that use bags. The other obvious one is the people who make the bags. And then there's the intermediary group that's doing the distribution. The people who make bags, like in India or China or Indonesia, they're usually not selling directly to the people that use the bags. They're selling to a European company or an American company, and the American or European company is selling straight to the users. So we have to overcome the bag users' hesitance to try something new, and we have to overcome the distributors' hesitance to try something new, because the bag makers don't care what they're making, whether they're making a fusion bag or a legacy design.
Yeah.
Just tell them what to make, and they'll happily make it. So we've recently changed our focus more to that center group, because the distributors that buy into the fusion idea, they're going to get an early adopter advantage because they're going to be bringing the new technology to customers, and they're going to look like the innovators, and their reach is a lot larger than ours. We're one of 1,000 companies in this space. If
Yeah.
I added 100 companies that are doing to the fusion side, then I've got a multiplicative advantage over where I am right now.
Um, you and I talked that there's a long history. You got a tenured workforce. I assume in that, and we didn't talk, so I just want to check in on that. Like, hey, we're on the brink of losing a lot of experience, talent, and strength organizationally. I would assume based on the story. Is that true?
Yes, in the past 2 years, we've lost 4 or 5 people that had 30 years of experience with us or more. That
That was my thought. Like, hey, this is a 30 plus year loss. And I assume that when that walks out the door for the last time, that there's something lost. Have you guys thought about it, talked about it? What is it that, and that isn't doom and gloom. That's just man, this person has 30 plus years of experience doing this and they just left us for the last time for the day.
I'm not sure what the actual technical term is for it, but we call it tribal knowledge.
Yeah.
You know, they know that this weird thing is going to happen in our supply chain in June every year, and there was no way that we were going to document it or remember it, but they would inherently do that. So some of it we've done by overlapping the person's time that's leaving with the person's time that's replacing them, so that there is some transfer of that tribal knowledge. And we're learning to document the functions of the job better. It's a blessing to have somebody for 30 or 40 years, but it comes with its own set of problems that get hidden until that person leaves.
Um, and you and I talked. I mean, talk a little bit about where you guys are headquartered, the community, before I ask the next question.
So we're in Lafayette, Louisiana. Uh, we're roughly halfway between New Orleans and Houston on the I-10 corridor. Uh, our first plant was on Easy Street in Lafayette, which is a little bit crazy. And we also have a manufacturing plant in a town of about 10,000 people called Eunice, Louisiana. Uh, it's it's a great place to live and raise a family. I I couldn't imagine being in a better place.
Yeah, and that was my sense, and I'm glad you just shared. And the reason I wanted to preface that is when we talked last time, you talked about, well, we have generational families that work for us. We have grandpa, son, and grandson at some times working for you or through the history of the company. Um, and I'm always intrigued by that. Like, well, what does that say about our company? And if you had to answer that and go, hey, we have that. What does it say about us?
Yeah, the idea that a mother or a grandmother would bring their daughter or granddaughter to come work in our plant and sew our bags is one of the things I'm most proud of. It's it's difficult work, but I think it says that we treat our people well if they're bringing their family in to work with us. And we're not Amazon or Walmart, but we are AmeriGlobe, and we have something that's a bit more personal.
And it sounds, again, we go back to that, some of the origin that's in your dad. You guys have certainly continued it. I look at that as remarkably positive, but always with that. And what I wonder when I hear that, then, well, what impact does that have on change? What impact does that have on, hey, we want to subtly rethink some of the things that we've done for that generation or two, that there could be some resistance to change based on that. And so I'm just curious about that.
So one of the ideas that came out in our manufacturing plants when Fusion came out is what's going to happen to the jobs. The same thing happened when we started having to bring in bags from overseas. And for the overseas thing, that actually was a problem. When NAFTA happened, our almost our whole industry moved to Mexico. We said no, we're going to keep our manufacturing 100% in the US. We found a way to do that, and we were competitive with Mexican prices with American labor. When free trade really opened up and bags started coming in from Asia, that wasn't really an option anymore. So we did shrink significantly in our workforce, and it was one of the worst times I've had, forget in business, like in life, because it was a large layoff that we did either in small groups or individually, because it wasn't employee number 5 that was being laid off. It was Sally that I'd had eaten lunch with every day for 2 years. So, we work to protect those jobs, but we also have to remember that we have to protect as many jobs as we can, because if you work to protect every job, you may end up with none. With fusion, it's not the same problem. We're always going to have manufacturing in the US because that's what ties us both to the usage side of bags and the manufacturing side of bags. We want to be able to see what our our partners overseas are dealing with in the making of the bags. And we want to have backup in case there are supply chain hiccups. There was this thing called COVID that really created a problem. Yeah,
Yeah.
our US plant, that was really important at that moment.
Yeah.
So with fusion, that doesn't cost us any jobs, because when fusion kicks off the way we believe it will, people will move from one job to another, not from one job to home.
Yeah. So we've talked about this, but I'd love for you to think about it and summarize it. That high performance herd. This is about the herd that you've created around you. That's the team, the leadership, the people, the culture. If I simply said, "Hey, what's the herd you've created?" What would you say? Here's what we've created at AmeriGlobe.
I feel like we've created a family. We we all know each other, and not just that, oh, this one's married or that one's married. Uh, some of the ladies that work in our office, they would bring their kids when there was a parent or a teacher in service day and there was no daycare. Or we'll have a summer picnic. Or uh, yesterday we actually brought the ice cream truck,
Oh, there you
and
go.
we all had ice cream together. It's those things that say that you're not just an employee at AmeriGlobe.
And I assume yet there's expectation. So it's more than like, yeah, hey, we accept and we love everyone. We go, we got to get a job done. We have growth plans. We need to, this isn't nonprofit. We're not picking money off the AmeriGlobe tree and handing it out to people. We got to create bags, sell value. So, talk about that counter in the culture with expectations, how high performing we are.
What we do is we use our bonus and pay structure to set up the desire to perform, or the incentive to perform. So, like in our manufacturing floor, everybody gets an hourly wage, but we have a piecework uh, quota set up, and every bit beyond that quota, they earn extra money. And if they go way beyond the quota, they get even more. And we have uh, similar bonuses in other areas of the company. So there's that monetary reason to want to perform. But I also think that when you know and care about the people around you, you kind of have a moral imperative to do your best, because you
Mhm.
don't want to do something that's going to create a problem or effort somewhere else because you didn't do what you were supposed to do. So a lot of it, I think, is hiring the right people, training them so that they know what's expected and why, and letting that feeling of team help drive you forward.
Um, you and I talked a little bit about kind of the challenge in front of you, this market pivot. We talked a little bit about it here. If you jump forward 2 or 3 years from now and say, we're successful if, what's the if?
I would like to see 5% of the industry, or a pace for 5% of the industry, to be using fusion bags.
Mm.
The idea now, we've uh, we've licensed 3 companies in India, 2 in Brazil. They're large. We expect them to do a lot of production, and we're in talks with companies in those countries and other countries. I think as we get more equipment out there, that we'll start to create some pull marketing that will draw companies to fusion. And I think that kind of change is really important to see in the next few years.
So a measurement of market adoption. We can get 5%. We're successful a couple of years from now, and then I'm sure beyond that, more adoption. Um, as you think about the challenge of that in the next couple of years, what will be the hardest part of getting that done?
So that conservatism of not wanting to change specifications is one problem. I think the other problem goes to the really low barrier to entry for our market. It used to be you had to invest in a manufacturing plant and all of the problems and capital that that requires. Now you could buy a container load of bags, put them in a storage unit, and sell them with a phone from your couch. There's
Yeah.
no incentive for that guy to sell fusion bags. So the more sophisticated the majority of the market is, I think the better chance we have for adoption.
Well, and this whole thing, and I've thought it a couple times in our conversation, but I'll put it here because I think it's an interesting thought process. And what I was left with is like, are you selling a better bag, better mousetrap, or are you wanting to sell um, courage to change? And it's an interesting. I was left with that. Like, do I want to go in and talk product feature, or do I want to go in and go, this is 20-year-old technology. We've been doing this forever. These are all the inherent problems. Do you, Mr. Customer, distributor, whoever, have the courage to change, to evaluate, to be open minded, or is status quo and what does status quo potentially cost you? So
I
that's an
think
interesting thought. And I'm just curious what your first reaction to that. And you may already be thinking that. I don't know.
I think that's an interesting thought, and it goes along with something we've kind of been thinking of is selling on the fear of missing out.
Yeah.
Some companies are going to switch, and one of our intents is to work through ingredient manufacturers. So a company that sells sugar ships that sugar to a company that also buys flour and various chemicals to make breads or cookies or whatever. So when they get bags that they have fewer problems with from sugar, why wouldn't they want them or their flour or whatever?
Yeah.
So the company that's selling only legacy style bags, they have a fear of missing out if they don't already have access to this style. And the purchasing agent in one area of the company that's not making the change may not look great next to the purchasing agent in this area of the company that is making the change. It's hard
Yeah.
to
And
do though because you can't, like, people will only make the decision you want them to make if you've given them enough information in a way that's understandable enough for them to make that decision. It's your fault if they don't decide the way you think they should.
yeah, no question. I'm left with there's an education component of this. There's a metaphorical sales approach. There's a what is the business case, dollars. But, I'm left with this like, as closing for your sales and marketing teams, like, do you want to be Blockbuster or Netflix? Like, do you want to own a bunch of retail stores with DVDs that you're trying to, you know, move and you lose store by store, or you have the new innovative way of doing this? And, every marketplace, no matter what it is, has that happening. There's always a technology adoption curve. And, this whole thing is, and do you have the courage to examine it? Can you look at it? What does it mean? And, you guys got to tell that story. You got to educate, but there's something in that I was left with, like, because our tendency, particularly when we make bags, is, well, we got a better bag.
Right.
You know, this is better, and everyone goes, yeah, okay, and it's what you said, fish is water. Like, yeah, I'm drinking water, man. I don't know, it's a bag.
So another one of our philosophies is every threat's an opportunity. And the idea that somebody else is going to try something you're not trying is definitely a threat, but there's also that opportunity of beating them to it. And it's it's often hard when things are going wrong to find that opportunity. But if you're stuck, like you said, renting DVDs and you're not seeing the threat coming of streaming, then if you don't find that opportunity, you've got a real problem.
Yeah, you're going to wake up one day and it might be too late. That's
Right.
the courage to change. Hey, there's innovation. There's always innovation. This is the latest. This is what's happening. This is the newest thought on these products. You want to
Somebody,
try to look at it. So
yeah, somebody's going to be supplying your product in this style bag,
yeah.
and their operators aren't going to be having problems.
So clearly you guys are in the midst of that. You're moving. There's a lot of positive signs. You're a technology leader. It sounds like there's early indicators. I'm going to shift last little bit here on kind of culture forward. Um, I always think about my own leadership, people that do this. It's inspiring people to believe, take action toward the belief. Um, and then there's an evaluation of ourselves. If I said, Danny, what's the hardest thing you've learned about yourself in leadership? And would acknowledge, this is always a like, here's my hardest leadership truth. For me, it's like, yeah, I'm a 2% low conformist. So like process, follow up that's a leadership truth for me. Like I'm never going to be good there. And, is there something for you about your leadership that you would go, yeah, this is, this is a leadership truth I've learned and have either had to accept, delegate, hire? Is there something like that in your story?
I am overly analytical. My dad at one point was really worried about that because the idea of paralysis through analysis is a real thing. But I've also surrounded myself with people who aren't shy about pushing if they think that's happening. And it is hard for people, no matter who the leader is, for people to want to push that leader to say, hey, you need to do something. And I think especially people like me who that is their weakness, they need to make it clear that there's never a repercussion for for pushing or a reminder or whatever they think is necessary. I want to hear, like, come to me with your problem, whether it's my fault or somebody else's. I'd like you to come with a solution too,
Yeah.
but please let me know that there's a problem so I have a chance to influence it.
And then I always look at, man, we're as leaders. Um, there's a Drucker quote: "Only three things happen naturally in organizations: friction, confusion, and underperformance. Everything else requires leadership." And so I as a three-time CEO, looked and said, "Well, if it's friction, confusion, underperformance, it's my fault and our leadership team's fault." And that almost always I go, "Well, there's a behavior we're tolerating that weakens our herd, that makes the herd less powerful, less performing." Um, if you look at yourself and go, yeah, here's things that I have or still do tolerate that make us less effective, what would you say?
I at times have trouble saying this person has reached the end.
Mm.
It's hard because we've been raised here to see the absolute best in everybody. So you have to balance that with a dose of realism. It's
And go
it's
ahead. Sorry.
never the great part of leadership. But going back to what you said, I'll give you a follow on quote to that is whatever you tolerate, you approve of.
Yeah, exactly. We walk by it, it keeps happening. So,
So you've
um,
approved it, yes.
yeah, yeah. Clearly there's some positive things happening, but I always, and a lot of the work I do with leadership teams, I go, you have the herd you deserve. That what's happening at your company you deserve, good or bad. And when you hear that for AmeriGlobe and go, we have the herd, or I have the herd I deserve, do you believe that, and why or why not?
I think that might as well be a truism. Like you have the success you deserve, you have the herd you deserve, you have the family you deserve. You, you influence everything around you, and especially if you're responsible for the company, or if you lead the company, you're responsible for the company. It,
And sorry, go ahead.
I would say there are nights when it's really hard when you're in the midst of a customer complaint and
Yeah,
you can't sleep because could we have done this different, or this thing that there's no way we could have known. How could we have known?
yeah. Um, So we'll start to move to wrap up. When you think about what you've lived through, second generation, growing a business, pivoting, there's a heavy reliance on technology, patent, there's this market adoption challenge. Anyone facing any of that, some of that, if you were to give advice to the listener, what would you tell them?
I think I would go back to that statement I said a few minutes ago that every threat's an opportunity. When something bad happens, there's that instant emotional moment where you say, is this really happening? What am I going to do? But the real answer is what opportunity just opened up, whether it's the tariff situation or COVID, as awful as that was. There is a way to get some form of success from everything that you think is bad happening to you.
Yeah. Danny, if the listener wants to follow you or AmeriGlobe, where should they go?
So our website is a little long. It's AmeriGlobe-FIBC.com. And we're on LinkedIn as well under AmeriGlobe LLC.
Awesome. And you?
I'm on LinkedIn as well under Danny Schnaars.
Danny, I really appreciate your time today. There's a lot of nuggets of wisdom, some real candid approach and honesty about how you grew up in the business and what's happened there. It's clear that you guys are on the brink of real success from my perspective, and so I wish you the best of luck there. I'll certainly follow you over the short period that will ensue, and look forward to hearing kind of the updates of how well AmeriGlobe has moved the market toward fusion. So thanks for your time and energy today. Really appreciate it. Thanks.
Thank you so much. I really enjoyed our conversation.
Yeah, me as well. Thanks.
Thank you.